Hello and welcome to the first webinar in a three-part series called Grow Your Own Laboratory Team. The idea behind the series is to present novel ways that laboratories are using to address the workforce shortage. My name is Susan Harrington and I chair the ASCP Workforce Steering Committee, and I will be the moderator for this webinar series. Following a brief introduction, we'll hear from three speakers today. First is Dr. Gensen, who will describe how his reference laboratory is partnering with the university to build a training center for medical laboratory science students. Next, Dr. Margolski, who has worked with the city of Philadelphia to develop a program for phlebotomists, will describe how this program was built and how it's going in its early years. Our third speaker is Dr. Amanda Harrington, and she'll tell us about how professional development is being used at her hospital to provide a career ladder to retain employees. So first, a little introduction. I'm sure those listening are very familiar with the workforce shortage. We know that there are insufficient accredited educational programs graduating students to fill the empty seats in our laboratories. A number of factors are contributing to this situation, including a lack of awareness of careers in the laboratory and students not choosing to major in the sciences. Some of our programs are unable to teach students, some of our programs are able to teach students rather, but the laboratories are just overwhelmed with work, and some of them are unable or unwilling to provide clinical rotations. There are also regulatory or licensure requirements that make it difficult to hire in some settings. And we have an aging workforce that is retiring or sometimes giving up due to burnout and stress. And some of our younger lab professionals are seeking other careers for some of these very same reasons. So the ASCP Vacant Survey is conducted every other year, and that data will be coming out this fall from the 2022 survey. It will be interesting to see how it compares. What we can see on this slide, some pretty high vacancy rates that were reported in many sections of the laboratory. And this data, interestingly, were compiled in the spring of 2020, which was sort of in the early days of the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see how that looks a couple of years later. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that there were about 300,000 jobs for medical laboratory scientists and medical laboratory technicians in 2021, and they projected that job growth would be about 7% each year through the year 2021. So this is about 25,000 openings a year. And we know that in 2022, there were about 245 MLS programs and 239 MLT programs. So if you figure we have roughly 500 training programs feeding that pipeline, and we need about 25,000 openings each year, each program needs to be graduating about 50 students a year in order to fill those empty seats. And you know, there are relatively few programs that are able to graduate that number. Most hospital programs probably graduate between 8 and 16, maybe 20 students. So we have far fewer people filling the gaps. So this slide shows the number of NAACLS accredited programs, and it's not just the MLS programs that are an issue. But you know, thinking about MLS programs, the number of programs dropped by over 240% over the last 50 years. I looked at in 1980, there were 760 MLS programs, and then now there are 245. Unfortunately, the number of MLT programs has stayed pretty steady, but you know, still there are an insufficient number of programs in all of the areas of the medical laboratory professions. So what strategies will we use to fill this pipeline and relieve the shortage? And that's what our series is about today. So we're going to explore some of those approaches that labs are using, including things like increasing partnerships with existing programs or even starting new partnerships. We'll hear a couple of those examples today. Some labs are hiring individuals with bachelor's degrees and providing education and training in-house. Ideas for retaining the lab professionals that we already have will also be presented. This series will explore online options, approaches in resource-limited settings, and highlight some means to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. So with that introduction, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Jonathan Jensen is a professor at the University of Utah Department of Pathology. He serves as Chief Medical Officer at ARUP Laboratories. This is a not-for-profit enterprise of the University of Utah. Dr. Jensen is a medical director in ARUP's chemistry division and is medical director of the laboratory automation team. His clinical and research focus is on automated clinical chemistry, process improvement initiatives, and the impact of laboratory regulatory programs on patient care. So I will stop sharing and let you take over, Dr. Jensen.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen here. All right, I will be talking today about our plans to build a clinical laboratory training center here at ARUP Laboratories in collaboration with our MLS division. These are my disclosures. I'm faculty at University of Utah, Chief Medical Officer at ARUP, and as was mentioned, ARUP is a nonprofit organization. So I'm going to start by describing a little bit about the workforce shortage that was already described. There is obviously a critical workforce shortage of medical laboratory professionals in the US, and this has become an increasing problem. A significant barrier to expanding training is actually the number of available clinical training sites that we have for our MLS students, and that's what we're trying to solve with this program. This hands-on experience is really a critical part of training, and it's something that we want to make sure isn't diminished. In our own state, it's expected that the growth in demand for lab professionals will exceed the number of graduates each year, which makes this even more of a crisis here. And so one solution is to expand the size and number of our MLS programs, but to do that, we need training sites. Just a little bit of an overview of the MLS programs here in the state of Utah. We are up at the University of Utah here by Salt Lake City. There's another program at Weber State to the north of us, a program at Brigham Young University, and another one at Utah Tech University. So we have a decent number of programs in the state. What we'll be describing today is a program here at the University of Utah. A little bit of background about our MLS division. It's actually a pretty large MLS program, I believe. We have 236 pre-MLS students. So students we might have recruited through high school outreach who say when they come to the university, maybe I want to go into the MLS program before they actually have to declare a major. We then have 60 MLS students, junior year and senior year, as well as post-baccalaureate, categorical, and master's students as well. The program is supported by 9 full-time faculty and 2 part-time faculty, and then 1 adjunct. And all of the faculty also have educational and administrative responsibilities as well. And they teach not just in the MLS program, but across a variety of other programs, including the School of Medicine, dentistry, nursing, for example. They also have a pretty robust summer immersion program where up to 50 students per year can get an exposure to the lab. More specifically with clinical training sites, we have 18 sites that the program uses, and that's across 5 affiliate systems or health networks here in Utah, as well as 2 elective sites. And 7 of these sites are ARUP-specific facilities already. For clinical rotations, our junior year, it's really lab courses they have to take, but in senior year, it's the clinical rotations of 18 weeks. And in the junior year, they also split it between morning and afternoon cohorts just to allow students who work to find a time where they can get back to school for training. So that's a little bit of background about the program. A little bit about our structure. Our MLS division is also part of our Department of Pathology, and that's shown here in the diagram on the right. So Department of Pathology reports up to the university, but both the MLS program and ARUP are both reporting up through the Department of Pathology. So we have an opportunity for collaboration just through that organization as well. The university has asked us to double our MLS program size, right? We are very excited about doing this, but we need training sites to be successful. And ARUP already has a lot of rotations, but a lot of these labs are esoteric, and it's really those common hospital laboratory rotations that we're struggling to finding enough locations. So it was a couple of years ago, a group of people here in the department had the idea, well, couldn't we just build a training laboratory? How would we do that? I mean, it became quickly apparent this should be a collaborative activity between ARUP and the MLS division. But how do we do it, and how do we actually fund it? And I'm going to talk through really how we decided to approach funding it and how that was thankfully successful. So there is a process of obtaining federally directed funding through congressionally directed spending. So the main term for this is federal earmarks. Many people have heard about that before. It's the congressional appropriations process. And the guidelines for earmarks vary from year to year. Some year there are no earmarks allowed at all in Congress. Other years they do allow them. The earmarks or applications are submitted by congressional representatives or senators. Some representatives and senators decide to participate in this process, others don't. So you'd really have to reach out to your representatives to understand what their process is. But they're allowed to submit a certain number of projects ultimately to the appropriations committees in Congress. Those filter through the appropriations committee, and some are advanced ultimately into the consolidated funding bill that's passed by Congress, usually at the end of every year. So just to reiterate, there is a formal application process. Reach out to your representatives to understand what that may be for them, and then obviously contact them. It is a long process. I think we learned a lot throughout this process. In April of 2022, we turned in our application to our congressional representative. They required a proposal, a formal budget, and letters of community support. So that was not just from ourselves and our own university leaders, but we also submitted letters from other healthcare facilities in the region. And they strongly encouraged letters from elected leaders as well as something that was strong supportive evidence. We made it through that appropriations process, and our project ultimately was included in the consolidated omnibus package that was passed by Congress in December of last year. And it was full funding. So they've appropriated $3 million to construct a clinical laboratory training center. That's just the beginning, though. That's the appropriation of funding. There's still a formal grant application process that's administered, in our case, by Health and Human Services, HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration. We had to turn in a formal grant in June, and we anticipate funding this fall. We were very concerned about the government shutdown because the award date was officially September 30th, but thankfully there's not a shutdown, at least in the near future. So we do believe this will proceed, hopefully on schedule. So what are we talking about building? We decided to renovate an existing laboratory space on ARUP's campus, a 2,800 square foot space, to build a training laboratory for our University of Utah MLS student rotations. It will be staffed by MLS faculty instructors who will be working over here in the training center as their home base. Our particular earmark is designated as a construction and equipment funding. So it can't be used for salaries, it can't be used for reagents, but it can be used to build the facility and to buy equipment for the facility. So we propose building essentially a mini hospital laboratory with instrumentation across chemistry, hematology, coag, blood typing, microvirology, and immunology. And I'll show you a picture of what that will look like on the next slide here. Here's the design diagram that we submitted and prepared as part of the proposal. We have a chemistry area where we'll have a high volume chemistry analyzer and wet bench space, an immunology area with electrophoresis, ELISA, and IFA and immunofluorescence microscopy, a microbiology area with an incubator and microbiology equipment, a blood bank area so they can learn how to blood type, a body fluids area, a heme and coag area with hematology instrument, coag instrument, and a wet bench for looking at body fluids there as well. And then a processing and phlebotomy area as well. So they can really get that full experience of running a lab. There's a reagent preparation area that we've designed so the instructors can build basically testing to fit specific requirements of what the teaching elements are as part of their curriculum. And also a conference room will be located here. Now, the goal is not for them to be sitting in the conference room in lectures, but really to be out here in the training laboratory. This took a lot of work to pull together in terms of facilities layout and design, laboratory design, getting purchasing and quotes for all of the equipment that needed to be part of that HRSA application. So we've got quotes for everything at this point. And then we had to submit the formal budget so that they could review it at a line item level and ultimately approve it. This will be located here in building 4, basically beyond these windows. There's a room on the inside on the first floor. It's a very convenient spot for the trainees to get to. It's very close to our security desk and cafeteria as well. So what have we learned and what have we thought about as part of this process? Well, some general areas for consideration. There was a lot more grant writing as part of this than I think any of us anticipated going into it. So maybe knowing that, preparing a little bit more in advance could have been helpful. Learning about the process was also key. There's very specific federal requirements on how the money can be spent, when it can be spent, and what it can be spent for. And there's auditing requirements as well. So we're trying to prior to funding, really build our system to make sure that we're meeting all the federal requirements. There's a lot of waiting. I mentioned at the beginning, we started talking about this almost 2 years ago. So having that patience and being willing to step through the process was also key. We want to identify synergies. A lot of the equipment that we've decided to purchase is the same equipment we're using in the clinical labs upstairs. We want to take advantage of reagent contracts and things like that, service contracts, to create synergies there. I've already talked about staffing from the university faculty. It's going to require some staffing here at the reference lab as well, just to make sure that we're ordering reagents and keeping things up and running appropriately. There's been a lot of negotiation about scope. I mean, yes, that's a lot of money, but it's also a lot of it is for construction. So deciding what type of equipment we can buy, in what areas, and in what scale really was a negotiation, and I'm really grateful to the team for participating in that. And then partnerships across group. We've got finance, facilities, our MLS program, compliance, safety. Many people pulled into this, and they've all been working together very well. So the key items: collaboration between groups. This wouldn't work if you don't have people who are all really committed to the idea and we're all really committed to making this successful. Thinking about funding from external sources, right? We never could have done this internally funded, but thinking about external opportunities really was a big differentiator here. And then that support from the community was incredibly vital in getting this launched and getting the approval to begin with. Our planned schedule, we were hoping to open it in fall of 2024. I'm suspecting it's going to be winter and not fall, just looking at current timelines, but we are moving forward as quickly as we can. With that, I want to acknowledge quite a few people who participated in this process as it's been ongoing. The chair of our MLS program, Diana Wilkins, and Tracy George, the president of our innovations group here at ARUP, were really the two people who kicked off this idea and decided, let's do this, let's work together to make this happen. We've had many people also involved. I also mentioned our project manager, Stephanie Knowles, people from compliance, facilities teams, as well as all the MLS faculty in making sure the equipment that we propose to purchase is actually what they want to use in their curriculum. The last thing I want to mention is huge gratitude to Vanskoyak and Associates. That's a firm we work with in Washington, D.C., who really prompted us to think about the federal appropriations process. They've worked through this with many other clients before and understood the steps. And so having somebody who's been through those steps before is absolutely critical as you're working through it, to make sure that we're saying the right things and emphasizing the right benefits that we believe that the program will bring. I believe that is my last slide. Certainly reach out to me if you have any questions about this after watching the presentation, and I will turn it back over for introduction of the next speaker.
Thanks, Dr. Genson. That was just wonderful to hear about. I know laboratories are spending a lot of money and time and effort on these new approaches because, you know, our universities aren't able to fill the pipeline. And I think it's important that our government understands that and you know, put some stake in the game for funding some of this education and training. So my hats off to you and your team for getting that going. Okay, so next we have Dr. Margolski. She's a hematopathologist at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. She holds the title of Associate Chair for Workforce Resiliency and Pathology, and she works on implementation of innovative approaches to recruiting and retaining laboratory staff. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to talk about a phlebotomy staffing initiative that we ran last year and will be running again in 2024. So an overview of phlebotomy at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We have 65 phlebotomists enterprise-wide. Most of these individuals work at our main campus in University City, but we also staff our specialty care clinics located throughout the suburbs of Philadelphia. For our phlebotomists, we have a career ladder in place as a key retention initiative. They have 3 levels plus a lead, and those leads are often individuals who focus on education of junior phlebotomists. As you would expect, the majority of our patients are pediatric, and we actually do go into our NICU and draw on our youngest patients. We see adolescents and then a handful of adults. So like everyone else, we've suffered with staffing challenges for the last 4 or 5 years, starting with, you know, we're in West Philadelphia. There's a lot of traffic. It's very congested. We have very limited parking. And so this location is pretty unappealing if you're someone from the suburbs or from New Jersey. You know, there's just no way to get here. We've had high turnover. 65% of our current staff have less than 1 year of experience with us. Before we went through with this project, we were very reliant on temps. And I think everyone knows when you're working with temporary staff, they may call out, they may be late. As a supervisor, you have very little recourse to work through that. That is in turn bad for group morale, not to mention that hiring temporary employees is expensive for the department. With our phlebotomists, we struggle with performance. Approximately 20% of our staff is on some level of disciplinary action, whether that's for tardiness, lateness, attendance, or for professionalism or even skill. And then finally, one thing that I believe is unique to pediatrics is the lengthy on-the-job training. Pediatric phlebotomy is not emphasized in training programs, and phlebotomy is not one size fits all. The same techniques that you might use with an adult who you can talk to and explain what's going on will not work when you're dealing with a 1-year-old or a toddler or a child with autism or is on the spectrum. So there's a whole different skill set that we ask of pediatric phlebotomists. And so, given the challenges that we were facing, we took a pause and wanted to think a little differently about how we staff our unit. Given that our local training programs, while excellent, were not really meeting our needs for employment, we've sort of wondered, could we grow our own pediatric phlebotomists? And that was when we began talking with our departmental leadership, with our HR partners, and they started sort of putting together our vision for what this pediatric phlebotomy training program might look like. And so we decided to grow our own pediatric phlebotomists and estimated we could take 6 to 8 trainees at one time. As part of this, we wanted to support our local community, see if we could find talent that came from West Philadelphia. Not only is it the right thing to do from an equity perspective, but it's also great to have talent that lives just a train or bus ride away from the hospital when it's snowing or flooding. We wanted to treat our new hires fairly and give them a decent wage while they're going through the training program. And we decided to not tie this to any sort of work commitment. So they were not obligated to stay in our employment for any amount of time once they finished their training. The last piece was I really wanted to use data to monitor the success of this program so we can document that we are doing right by these students. And so our HR business partners led us to the West Philadelphia Skills Initiative, which is a workforce development agency right in our backyard. And I'm sure there's some wherever you are too. These groups exist to close opportunity gaps in the community. So WIPC has really strong partnerships with employers throughout Philadelphia. They also have deep roots in churches and other community organizations in West Philadelphia. And through those deep roots, they're able to reach people who are not able to be connected with by traditional recruiting methods. So they're very involved in things like Facebook, Instagram, and as I said, like community message boards. So this is an example of the ad that they ran for our program. WIPC is recruiting for clinical lab assistants in partnership with CHOP. If you are interested in taking this route as a staffing initiative, here's a little background on what a workforce development program can do for you. So they provide a pre-screened pool of local talent. WIPC also took our prospective hires and put them in a 3-week pre-employment training program. So this focused on universal skills like professionalism, conflict resolution, and growth mindset, but they customized it for healthcare to cover things like HIPAA, which are relevant for us. WIPC continues to provide ongoing coaching for retention, and all of the people who go through the program are part of their alumni network. So it's a great fit for the employer and for the hire. What's tricky is that they are very specific demands. So you have to be able to take all the individuals in the cohort at one time. The hires cannot be competing against one another for a limited number of positions. So that's why it was a really great fit for phlebotomy, but might not have been a great option for a histotechnician program. They're looking for jobs that have benefits and jobs that have a growth trajectory. And for this reason, they love placing people in healthcare jobs where once you get your foot in the door, there's really unlimited avenues for growth. But the next question was really, this is great. We have this talent. How are we going to pay for it? So we were connected with Philadelphia Works, another workforce development group. They are a distributor of federal on-the-job training funds. The eligibility requirements to work with these groups are that you're currently unemployed and you must live in a specific county. So in our area, we have Philadelphia works, Montgomery County works, Delaware County works. And so you just need to be connected to the right institution. These groups reimburse 50% of wages up to $8,000 during the training program. So we ended up getting about $19,000 back to support this. And without this money, I don't think we could have run this program. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what our training program looked like for this audience, but I'm really happy to talk to anyone offline. Essentially, this was an 8-week training program that was a mix of didactic and practical instruction. So at the beginning, our students were focused in the classroom, learning just the basics of anatomy, healthcare, and phlebotomy and laboratory medicine. As the weeks went by, they transitioned to spend more time in our lab, practicing blood draw on each other, on models, and eventually on our older patients. We relied heavily on a textbook that was approved by NACLS, and we used the instructor versions of lectures. The instructor provided quizzes and activities to build the classroom curriculum. The goal of was that at the end, our students should be able to do anything a traditional hire should do. So we expected them to be able to draw one-handed and even to walk into our NICU and do venipuncture. So you can see we were really holding these students to a high standard. And so these were the students we ended up taking on. We had 400 applications, which we then whittled down to a pool of, I want to say 50. Those 50 people were invited in for a site visit so they could understand more about what we do and what the expectations for them would be. And we then whittled those people down to just 10, which we accepted. Once we selected our hires, they were funneled directly into the 3-week training program with WIPSI in professionalism. And then from there into our 8-week training program at CHOP. And then anyone who successfully completed this program was offered a job on the spot, and they transitioned into our full-time workforce the following Monday. And so what happens? What happens when you take people off the street with no background in healthcare and allow them to do blood draws on some of the tiniest, most vulnerable people in our society? So I'm really excited to share this data with you today. We selected 10. We had one person fail their background check. And once the program started, 2 dropped, I would say, in the first 2 weeks. They really just, pediatric phlebotomy was not for them. And believe me, I understand that. Per WIPSI, this is to be expected. They estimate you have 20% attrition in programs like this. 7 individuals completed the training, and I'm happy to say all 7 individuals are still working in healthcare, and 5 are still with us at CHOP. So the 2 that left, one is now working in the adult hospital across the street, and the other went to higher education for getting a nursing degree. And then we compared our trainees to our traditional hires. And so we looked at how many sticks they're doing per month. And so you can see that by the 2nd month, they're pretty equivalent to one of our traditional hires. And by the 3rd month, there's no question they're doing the exact same number of sticks. But more importantly, what's the quality of their work like? In the middle column, you can see our students. And on the right side, you have our traditional hires. And so when we look at the adequacy in terms of quantity, non-sufficient draws, clotting, and hemolysis, there's really no difference whatsoever. And I think it's actually pretty striking that some of our traditional hires have rates of clotting and QNS of over 50 per month, whereas our trainees are really in the single digits. Another thing that I think is pretty striking is the probation. Every new hire at CHOP is given a 90-day probation period, during which time we make sure that they master the skills and that they have the professionalism that we expect of all employees. And you can see none of our students required an extended probation, while 50% of our traditional hires needed additional time to meet our standards. In terms of corrective action for skills, none of our students had any corrective action, but 30% of our traditional hires did. So what this tells me is that when you grow your own, you are able to tailor the training to meet your needs, the needs of your organization. And I think if you have a team of dedicated educators, you can build a more effective workforce. There's still more work to be done when it comes to retention. So of our as I've shared, 2 of our students left, so that's 30% attrition, and that's the exact same as our traditional hires. So what this tells me is just because you train someone, you can't expect them to have some sort of loyalty gene. Whatever market forces exist in your area are going to apply to your students just as well as your traditional hires. And so I think there's still a discussion, should we require some sort of work commitment? We haven't gone that route yet. I'm reluctant to have someone feel obligated to work with our patients. We want people to be here because they want to be here, but we are still thinking actively about how to make this better. And so, in summary, I presented to you how we partnered with 2 local workforce development groups to grow our own pediatric phlebotomists. By partnering with West Philadelphia Skills Initiative, which provided talent, and Philadelphia Works, which provided funding, and we were able to build a program from the ground up. We continue to struggle with retention, but our workforce development partners have our back. They provide coaching and ongoing support. It's certainly not easy, but I hope the data that I've shown is pretty compelling that it can build a more robust workforce, people that meet your organization's needs. And a big thank you here to Dana and Kareem in phlebotomy. Without these 2, we could not have done this. Adam Beatagary is from laboratory operations, and really our HR partners were so instrumental in getting this off the ground. And that's my last slide, so I'll stop sharing and pass back.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful to learn about. I think that all hospitals struggle with keeping their phlebotomy team full and suffer from the same types of issues with attrition that you presented today. So I really loved hearing about this program, and I hope that others listening will be able to benefit from your experience as well. So next we have Dr. Amanda Harrington. She's a professor in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at Loyola University Chicago, and she's the medical director of the Loyola Medicine Clinical Microbiology Laboratory at Loyola University Medical Center in Maywood, Illinois. She's currently serving as the American Society for Microbiology representative to the American Society for Clinical Pathology Board of Certification Board of Governors. Welcome, Dr. Harrington.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harrington, and thank you to everyone for inviting me today to talk a little bit more about our Grow Your Own strategies here at Loyola. I had just a couple things I wanted to say as a disclaimer. I love lab medicine, but I should just probably disclaim that my main focus is microbiology. So, and our experiences might not be everyone's experiences, but it sounds like we are, a lot of us are in the same bucket. I just want to backtrack for 2 seconds and reiterate some of the things we've heard from our other speakers, our first 2 speakers. One of the biggest hurdles for getting people into the laboratory is having an opportunity to have that clinical training site. So I was so excited to hear about the developments at ARUP offering more clinical training sites. Unfortunately, on the flip side of that too, sometimes we have sites that aren't going, that aren't being filled, and that's a lost opportunity as well. So it's a challenging system. What are some of the proposed solutions that we've seen in the past? We'll try to think outside of the box, right? Can we work off shift when laboratories maybe have more space or less people, so there's more opportunity? Could we engage with some virtual options or some simulated training? And for sure, there are definitely viable models there as well. And, I think we've talked off and on over the years about a type of matching program for programs so that all the slots are filled. Or could we just offer, less, a simpler certification in some of the areas where it's just more challenging to get that training? And obviously there are pluses and minuses to those types of strategies. And I don't think any one of those is a perfect solution. One piece I wanted to share from our observational experience here at Loyola is that consistently over time for the last, 7 years, we see lots of undergraduates coming out of college with STEM education. STEM is really being emphasized, and they're excited about science, but they really don't get a lot of guidance on what they can do with that degree. And so they sort of just tumble out of undergraduate looking for somewhere to go with that bright and engaging mind. And unfortunately, almost a universal truth, and at least the folks that are stumbling through our door, is that they have never heard of laboratory medicine, and their professors have never heard of laboratory medicine. So that's one factor that we're trying to get ahead of. So, we really looked at this opportunity here, and I just wanted to put up a quick example that we got some feedback from one of the interviews. And the person had said to us, emailing our lab manager, hey, I learned a lot about this position and the laboratory. I learned more from our hour-long conversation than I did from any of my professors. I learned things that I didn't know were out there. And the labs that I went to interview in seemed like dead ends. But when you took me on a tour, I felt that energy jump out at me. So we know these students are out there. We know they're engaged. They want to come into the laboratories. It's just how do we get them in there? So, that guidance for that group is a little bit lacking. And there's really not a great roadmap. So that's really an opportunity to think about this alternative pathway of grow your own. And so we've really tried to take advantage of this idea of the categorical certificate programs here at Loyola. So if you think about, where are the fish where there are more fish, and see if we can bring them into the laboratory. So I want to mention at least two pathways that are really viable. One is this awesome partnership that's been developed between American Society for Microbiology. Dr. Harrington was one of the main proponents of getting that off the ground, and Weber State University. And so this partnership is about 2 years in the making, and has been up and running, and is really aimed for that population of students that we just talked about. They've come with an undergraduate degree in one of the life sciences, and they really are interested in laboratory medicine and specifically microbiology. And so Weber State provides the online education to provide that curriculum and the background that you need for the laboratory. And then individual laboratories that are out there, typically it's led by an ASM member who's already a director, wants to bring someone into the laboratory, or laboratory managers that are out there. They can do their clinical rotations at that site, and then they're eligible to take the categorical microbiology exam with the ASCP through Route 3. And so since this program has started, there have been 53 students enrolled at 26 different training sites. So this has been widely adopted across the country, which is exciting. 14 students have completed the exam, and 12 out of 14 have passed. So that's a great start. And then there's 9 waiting to take the exam. So what does that maybe look like here at Loyola, which I think is a little bit more homegrown of a program? We launched what we call our M program, and that's exactly what it is. It's a categorical training program here in the late 2016. And typically we find folks who are applying to our laboratories, and they start in our processing area, which we call a lab support position, and they work there about 6 months. We really want to vet them and see, how they handle that really dynamic area of the laboratory. It's a complex, fast-moving, multitasking kind of area. If they look like a strong candidate and we have an open position, then we will move them to this M candidate program. And like our previous speaker just said, there's no commitment to stay on after you finish this type of training route. We pay them the same as an entry-level medical laboratory scientist. And the expectation is that in about 15 months, you are eligible to take the certification exam in microbiology, the categorical certification exam. We provide some recorded lectures. There is a lot of self-study. We do provide opportunities to observe at all the areas in the laboratory, and then they're trained on the job to work at the bench. And so you can see the statistics here for our program here on the right. So since 2016, We've had 13 folks go through the program and get certified. We actually have 5 who are currently in training. And then we've been able to retain a lot of these folks either in our laboratory or in the area of laboratory medicine. So seven people that have come through are still in our laboratory. 1 has been promoted to supervisor level. Another person has been promoted to our lab manager. She was actually our first M candidate. 2 moved to out-of-state laboratories, but they're still in microbiology laboratories. 3 moved on to industry, and that's kind of great because you have those folks kind of on the flip side. So although they're not in the laboratory with us, they're working on some of our instrumentation in the lab. So that's actually a great advantage, I think. And 1 moved on to podiatry school. So 50%, when you look at our FTE in the laboratory, 50% of our current FTEs are actually our M's, our categorical M's. And here at Loyola, we've actually been able to, not the microbiology lab specifically, but Loyola has embraced this categorical certification, and we have certified categorical people who have passed the categorical examinations in other areas of the laboratory, like hematology and blood bank, etc. So this approach has really been embraced. So how do we expand those kinds of programs? A lot of times it's just through word of mouth. It's for people who want additional opportunities. I think it would be great to keep talking about this with other laboratories. I think there's sometimes some misconceptions about how to get people in the door and get them on board, but it does take coordination with your administration. And then, building that curriculum on your own is challenging. So that really, that is provided through something like the Weber State program, if that's a route you want to take, for the DIY kind of grow your own in the laboratory. Sometimes that can be a challenge. Again, clinical rotation sites, that's something that is a limiting reagent, even with the programs that are existing. And so excited to hear about the opportunity that ARUP was spearheading, creating more sites. That's just fantastic. But, once we get people in the door, we need to try to keep them. And so that's one of the number one things we hear people leave for is new opportunities, new conveniences. They want additional responsibility in addition to just having more pay. And so how do we do that? And so this is a little bit of, what's old is new again. I think a lot of laboratories had gone through a phase of having maybe tiered job categories and had consolidated them for one reason or another. And we're in that same position where we had those in the past, and now we're rethinking those. So having tiered job categories allows not only an opportunity for entry, but also an advancement. So we're rethinking this in light of our categorical certification programs. The people who are coming in and have they're fully certified as medical laboratory scientists, sometimes there was a little bit of friction why the pay was similar for entry level, and I think that's worth considering. So for folks who aren't currently certified, we would start them off at this first level. You still have to meet the requirements for moderate or high complexity testing, but it allows an opportunity for entry. And then for the folks who have gone on to get certification, they have additional experience, they're coming in from a training program and they're fully certified, they could start at this second level, or it offers opportunities for advancement with experience. So this is recognizing that value of certification, that's a valuable tool to have, and that you can advance once you've worked here for a while. And then the third tier is to recognize really those high performers, and everybody knows who these folks are. They're the folks who always volunteer for the extra job. They're the people who are doing a lot of your highly technical work, your key operators, the folks who help you do your validations. They really like to do the teaching. They work on administrative responsibilities like safety, or maybe they're in charge of IQCP or quality, etc. So we needed a way to recognize those efforts and their experience and their knowledge. And so you can see that this level is including a higher level of knowledge, certification and experience. So this is really one of the highest tiers before you move into kind of the more supervisory, managerial, and administrative role. So this is giving us hopefully somewhat of a career ladder in the laboratory. One other thing to think about, and something we're thinking about exploring here, are dedicated positions in the laboratory. Now, I think you have to hit a certain size of laboratory before this really maybe becomes applicable, but it's worth thinking about. Maybe it can be more of a regional position, et cetera. It just depends on your laboratory organization and structure, but these dedicated types of positions offer, again, opportunities for advancement and recognition for high performers. And the one that we're thinking about here, again, what's old is new again. I think laboratories had quality assurance specialists in the past. Those got consolidated in efforts to, streamline budgets and make things more standardized. But this is something that we're really thinking about again. People that have experience, they really want to engage in those teaching and administrative responsibilities. There's a lot of regulatory preparedness work that goes in, and especially in laboratories with larger size and complexity. Maybe you're a center that has multiple ambulatory sites, et cetera. That could be something as well. So there are a number of ways to think about giving people new opportunities or opportunities for advancement. And then we have been talking for quite a while, and this hasn't been implemented, but this idea of a career ladder, not just tiered job classifications, but a true career ladder that would be within those classifications. So this offers opportunity for advancement and recognition of high performers. And this is really not new, right? This is a strategy that has been adopted and implemented for a long time by our nursing and pharmacy colleagues. And so this process would involve a little bit more work from the medical laboratory scientists. They would have to fill out an application and they would undergo an annual evaluation. And then they would need to create a portfolio and keep that up to date that would document their activities. So there are some minor and major criteria, and we haven't fully fleshed that out yet, but we have a lot of ideas about how that would work. But here, things like certification and experience would count, and essentially you're gaining points and you're adding value to your portfolio, and that will put you at a higher level in the career ladder. Things like professional society participation, interprofessional education would count, graduated responsibilities in the laboratory, teaching, administrative duties, a lot of things like regulatory preparedness. We have hospital committees that some of our medical laboratory scientists volunteer for, like quality and safety, even things like volunteerism. I did a science fair. I went to my Girl Scout troop and gave a lecture about medical laboratory science. You're doing education for the medical laboratory science program or things like that. So it really highlights that group that is really engaged, and it just allows you to kind of move up and down the ladder. Ideally would be recognized by a monetary value with that ladder when you meet those major and minor criteria. So again, this is something we're still working on, hasn't been fully implemented, but I really love this idea of recognizing the efforts that people are putting in the laboratory on a regular basis. I think the question is always how to sustain that success, right? We have a lot of great ideas and we have a lot of bright people, but how do we convert that into people who want to stay in the lab, they want to grow and stay engaged throughout their career? And that's really what we're trying to build. So grow your own might be a little bit intimidating, but I think you can do it with a little bit of thinking and a little bit of effort too. So thank you for the opportunity to share our experience here today.
Thanks, Dr. Harrington. You gave us a lot of good ideas to consider for our laboratories. I would say that where I work at the Cleveland Clinic, we've implemented some of those things as well. And our administrator and our chair did some town halls because of the workforce shortage and just, concerns about burnout, among the people who are, left behind. And they do mid-year stay interviews to ask individual managers do mid-year stay interviews to ask our employees, what's on their mind, what would make them stay, what makes them want to leave. And professional development really comes up as one of the most important concerns among our staff. So, you are right on target there with your program. We're certainly glad to hear about it. So this includes our first Grow Your Own Lab Professionals seminar. I want to give a big thanks to all of our speakers. We really appreciate hearing about your ideas. And, most of all, we value your commitment to the laboratory profession. These things are just so important. If audience members have questions or ideas or approaches about growing your own, we'd love to hear from you. And you can place your questions and comments related to this webinar in the annual meeting app. I'd also like to thank the audience for listening, and also our ASCP staff for producing this series, especially to Edna Garcia, Iman Kundu, Molly, I'm not sure how to say your name, Molly Streletti, and Christina Lucas. So thanks to everyone at ASCP for supporting the laboratory professions and for producing this program. And I think that's all we have for you today, and we'll look forward to sharing with you on our second webinar that will be later this year. Thank you so much. Have a great day.